Hey, welcome back to the Nothing Left to Say podcast. My name is Beau, and of course, I've got my co-host here, Justin. And before we get into today's topic, of course, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel if you guys like this content. So today we're talking about Auteur Theory, its history, its evolution, and its impact, and what we find interesting. But first, I think I should introduce our special guest today, Zachary Mcdougall, if you want to go ahead and give us a brief introduction.
Hey, my name's Zach. My main qualification is that I've known Beau for a really long time, but I did go to college to where I basically read a bunch of very old books, and a lot of the emphasis of discussion about those books was on the interpretation of the author, and I always kind of was interested in how that theory pertained to other things, that idea that the only thing that mattered was the author's intent, which we haven't really discussed what auteur theory is, but I think something to say about that.
I've got a definition pulled up from it. So it came about with the French New Wave film, and the whole idea is, so reading straight from the definition, theory of filmmaking in which the director is viewed as the major creative force in a motion picture arising from France in the late 1940s. And it was coined a little bit later after that by an American film critic. But it's this idea, it started off in film, is the idea that the director is the person who shapes the film. Like a Tarantino movie or Spielberg, or right, the language that we use to describe film nowadays comes from this.
Yeah, and there's a number of different interpretations of exactly what it means to be an auteur film. But largely it seems to center around this idea that the director has the final cut, right? They get the final edit. They get the last say in what goes down.
Do they anymore?
No, so there was a huge push, right? So there was a huge push to get rid of that because ultimately producers want to make money, right? Or studios want to make money. And so they know what works, they know what sells. They have teams of marketers that know how to push this project out to the public, and they ideally want a talented director who's really good at listening to instructions.
Focus group results are the real final cut.
Right.
Yeah, the go focus. I mean, which is funny because right, auteur theory came about in the 40s and later with French film, like the heyday of American cinema, in the 30s, the big studio eras, like it was a factory line of making movies. There was a room full of script writers. There were actors that were on contract with Paramount. You had a director that was on contract with Paramount, and you pumped it out. So I think, it was the idea that the director is this driving force, and that was a big shift and a big change, and then influenced American, and then we tried to get away from it because people wanted to make more money.
Yeah. Actually, one of the more famous or well-known in America, I suppose, film auteurs was Hitchcock, who fought back against the studios by specifically not giving them enough film to be able to edit it in any way other than the way he actually put it together or wanted it to be put together. He didn't have extra shoots and things like that for them to take from, so they simply had to put it together in the order he intended, which more or less led to the modern day storyboard.
Right.
Fun fact.
Yeah, that's cool.
We still talk about film that way. We still talk about Kubrick films the same way we talk about Hitchcock films. We still talk about the Tarantino films the same way we talk about either of those guys.
No, J.J. Abrams, Tim Burton, like all over the place. Internationally, Jackie Chan, John Woo. Was like, I mean, as far as film, and I definitely have a big interest in film. Like, the director has a big say and can shape the film, but like to say that the director is the only person that makes a movie the way it is a little far-fetched.
Well, sure. I mean, there's so many people involved in the process, right? Like, but at the end of the day, and not to jump too hard into what we're ultimately going to be talking about, right? But it's all about branding,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, and as far as branding, right? The brand sells. The reason why Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson gets his name on the top of the billboard for whatever new movie is coming out with, because people want to go see him in a movie. They could kind of care less about the film. And so, like, it's kind of funny. Like, I know with directors, right, you get these things where, like, you know, you do a couple movies, they do pretty well, you know, you've kind of proven to the studio that you're a good director. Then you get to do your passion project. Or, you know, like all the famous stories, like, you know, the movies that, you know, I forget the name of it. They made it after his death. But like Coppola had dreamed of making this movie forever, and then, or Kubrick dreamed of this movie forever, and then afterwards, after he passed, they came together to create his vision. Like, even the biggest names in Hollywood are still under the pressure of the studio. I mean, you have to get the money to make the film.
Absolutely. Right. Unless you have the money yourself and can fund it yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy what an undertaking making a film is these days.
I think making movies, even down to like the indie, you know, shot in your backyard on an iPhone kind of thing, like the lightning in a bottle, like the series of cosmic events, the stars that have to align for you to sit in a movie theater and watch Tenet or, you know, whatever the big new hot movie is. Like,
right.
It's so wild. Like, so many scripts die before they even get read. You know, so many movies fall into production traps or run out of funding, or the actor bails, or the director quits, or...
Right, which is why it's like a challenge to say, you know, each of the creators of these movies is individually responsible for, like, the content on the screen. Because not only were there all these people that made it, but there were all these external forces acting on it, determining whether or not it could be made.
And like, even like funny stuff. Like, I saw a video essay talking about it, but like, you know, kind of fun movie facts that like they really stylized like blood spurt from, you know, you see like anime and samurai films, and, you know, Tarantino's kind of done with like Django, like just like the ridiculous over the top blood. Was an accident on a set of a Kurosawa film, Sanjuro. There was like a rubber hose that was going to get cut and squirt out blood, and the prop guy overpressurized it. And so when it got cut, instead of like the normal little spurt, it was like this ridiculous fan of blood. And the actor rolled with it, and then Kurosawa fell in love with it and kept the cut, and then that became a signature style of his and was definitive throughout all of film.
And I imagine he's credited with it and not the guy who overpressurized the hose.
Oh, yeah, no. Prop guy number 37 does not get any credit in the annals of history for changing film, which is always like, it's always so tragic, right? You know, you talk about, you know, whatever movie, you know, you're like, oh man, the set design is so gorgeous. Like, you know, I really like the way the scenes are laid out, or like maybe even don't even consciously recognize it, but you like watching the movie because you think it's pretty. Like, the director didn't paint the scene or pick the chair in the background, or...
The sound design in Star Wars is so legendary. Like, you can imagine in your head what like a blaster sounds like, what a lightsaber sounds like, what a door sounds like in that universe.
Oh yeah, the beeps, like everything, like down to the beeps and boops, like a TIE fighter screaming.
George Lucas didn't make any of that, and I don't know the sound editor's name. I'd have to look it up right now.
Yeah, like I always feel kind of guilty about stuff like that. Like, I think about these, you know, like Star Wars sound design, or, you know, the lighting in whatever movie, and I'm like, it's so pretty and so cool, but I don't know who did it.
Yeah.
There we go.
And we're explicitly talking like sound effects. A lot of composers do get credited more prominently in movies, or at least I've heard them. You know, a movie pitched as, oh, it's got the, you know, the sound guy or the music guy from X movie or Y movie, right? Like,
I mean, John Williams, you know, is the big famous one.
Right. But even Hans Zimmer, you know, gets a lot of hype.
But even then, the number of composers I could name, movie composers I could name, it's pretty much limited to one hand.
I've got Hans Zimmer and John Williams. That's about it.
Yeah.
It is like, it's this weird pecking order hierarchy. In a lot of ways, it's like, I mean, the actors, everyone knows the actors because you see them on screen. So, like, yeah, that makes sense. And I think the director gets a lot of credit for this auteur theory. But then it's like this sliding scale, you know, like logarithmic decay into nothingness if you're like best grip.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is to say, like not everyone does it for the fame and the glory. Some people just enjoy the work they're doing, and for some people, it's also just a job. Like they just show up at work. And
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I mean,
That's part of the contract they negotiate, right? Is what place they are in the credits. So that's just to some people, making the money, earning a living is more important than having their name.
Oh yeah, no,
well, to some extent, that's really the case in like any job, right? Like some people go into a place of business and they say, you know what, I'm coming in at this entry level position, and I want to climb the ranks. I want to put myself out there. I want to advance into something else. I want to be recognized. And other people are like, you know what, I'm going to show up. I'm going to do my work. I'm going to go home. I'm here for a paycheck, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, it's not, and not to not to derail, but like I think it's a tragedy in so many ways of like American work culture. Like you have to be the hard charging, want to be the top, be the next CEO. Like it's looked down upon just to be like, yeah, I show up and I punch paperwork and then I go home and I enjoy my life.
Right.
It can't just be a job; it has to be a dream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say definitely in the majority of cases it's looked down upon. I'm lucky enough to work somewhere where like I had a one-on-one interview with like my boss's boss, and that was straight up what he asked me. He's like, do you want to just come in and get a paycheck? Because that's totally fine. Just let me know now and we can move on. Like he's like, or are you more interested in moving on to bigger, better things? And if so, let's talk about that.
No, and I think that stuff like that's so refreshing to hear. Like,
it is absolutely.
An interview to be like, I understand that you need money to live, and you need to work at this place to do it. I think to circle back to the film stuff, I think it's kind of like the question is like with Auteur Theory, like I think there are directors that definitely have influence. Like Wes Anderson, I think is a great example. That guy is hands on with so much stuff. Like I remember seeing, funny movie anecdotes kind of thing. But for the Royal Tenenbaums, when the actresses smoked a cigarette, and it was like this brand of cigarettes that was sold in Ireland in the 70s and then was discontinued. And Wes Anderson saw some photos of it and loved the design, and he like had to have her smoke that brand. And so the prop masters had to go out and recreate the specific cigarettes. And so, like, I think there can be varying levels of directors. I mean, David Fincher is a common example of like he is incredibly overbearing.
But again,
is that okay? Like, they get away with it because they're successful, but like when you're starting off in the career, I don't imagine that you get to yell at some prop guy.
Right. Compare the difference between the people whose names will never be remembered without looking them up that directed the Super Mario Brothers movie and were like notorious a-holes to basically their entire crew, to the point of completely eliminating any interest the crew had in making the film. Compare that to like Alfred Hitchcock, right? Who was notorious for like torturing the ever-living hell out of his female actresses in order to get them in the correct mindset or whatever, stuff that really shouldn't have ever flown to begin with, but like it did, and he was respected for it, right? Like, huge difference, even though it's the exact same behavior.
I think, like, and also not to derail, but like, a personal pet peeve is like I hate the kind of inherent misogyny that you see a lot of times of like female actors getting just tortured on set, or actresses like getting tortured on set. Like I know for The Shining, the wife was like Kubrick was just horrible to her to like get her into like constant anxiety. But then you see stuff like Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant. Like it was such a powerful performance that he like struggled through this. And, we praise the men for these like horrible things that they do or the directors has done to them.
When Christian Bale gained and lost and gained a bunch of weight for.
Oh man.
Yeah, and everybody's like oh wow,
Batman.
Yeah, and everyone's like, oh wow, what an achievement! It's like wow, this guy just tore up his body because the directors had like target weights for him for each of these movies.
Mm-hmm. Also, not to mention, like, he's a millionaire and can just pay a personal trainer to get him absolutely shredded.
Absolutely, and they don't they don't drug test Hollywood stars. You can use as many steroids as you want.
But no, it's completely natural to look like that all the time.
It's not a competition, right? So they don't have to adhere to the certain standards.
Exactly.
Or worry about getting caught.
The image is the most important thing, arguably, on film. So, like, of course, if there are, like, tricks that a normal person can use to get an image comparable to, like, a professional bodybuilder after months of work, of course they'll use them.
Yeah. And like a dark side to film, like, stuff like torturing your actors and stuff like that, like, it's so much in film. Like, the final cut is all that matters. Like, it doesn't matter how much like blood, sweat, and tears and misery went in during the production. Like, as long as the movie is like, as long as audiences like the movie,
right?
It was clearly worth it.
That's a fun question I never thought of. How many hours of deleted footage are from just like the worst days of shoots? How many days did they show up and it just like sucked for everyone and they like didn't even look on the screen?
No one wanted to be there. Yeah. I also just imagine like how defeating that can be. Like, if it's just like nothing goes right, everyone's miserable, and you like leave for the day and you're like, well, we did nothing.
Yeah.
And wasted $50,000.
This is day 10, hour 12 of doing the same 5-minute scene that we've been doing, and it's been awful every single time.
I watched a great documentary on this called Tropic Thunder. It's very good.
The real fake events. Now, Tropic, like, I mean, not to make fun of Hollywood for, like, not surprisingly making a bunch of cinema and satire about how rough it is to be in Hollywood. But yeah, no, Tropic Thunder is absolutely great.
Definitely didn't survive the PC test of time, but
I think it does. I think it does better than a lot of movies that came out of that era. Like,
I'm not dissing the movie. I'm just saying that, like, for people who don't understand necessarily what it's trying to portray or say, like, if they were just to walk into the room while someone was watching it, it would come across the wrong way.
Definitely.
No, absolutely.
And it certainly couldn't be made now. I think it was like at the tail end of that. Like,
like if you, exactly. If you tried to make it today, No,
and like I think that's an entire different discussion of like how can you make a movie like it is today, or like is it right to make it? But like I think an impressive feat of the movie to have Robert Downey Jr. do blackface for 2 hours and everyone love it.
Right. That's pretty much what I was talking about. All right. So, actually, before we break away from the discussion of film and delve into auteur theory as it applies to other aspects of our life, of our society, you were telling me something the other day about the top billing and how it's kind of weird. If you want to just share that.
Yeah. So like the idea of like brand, right? So like movies are sold on, right? Like movies need advertising, like any product needs advertising, and the brand is always the actors. So like it's that thing, like if you never notice it, and Zach, I don't know if you know this, but like you ever see like a movie poster and all the actors are lined up on the front of the movie poster, but then the names at the top of the movie poster don't line up with the actors.
It's annoying. It's ridiculous.
It's super annoying. But it boils down to the most important actor, whoever has the biggest brand, and the directors and really the producers is going to like say is the most important, is going to get the most money. They're always going to be in the center of the shot, like the most prominent position. But also their name is going to be the furthest left on the top of the poster, so it's the first name you read. So they get top billing, which comes from like the old theater days when you would have, like the playbill and the top billing, you'd be at the top of the playbill. But so it's like weird. It's super annoying because you're like, I didn't know that Charlize Theron was 400 pounds and looked like Dwayne Johnson. Like,
it doesn't make any sense to how you actually use a poster visually, right? Like I don't read the names at the top of the poster and then look at the picture in the middle. Like I look at the picture, I look at all these actors that I recognize. I wonder who the other ones are. try to match the names up, and then of course they don't match up at all.
Not to
One of the reasons,
no, sorry,
like on movie posters, there's one actor that's like dead center, and then it's like the rest of the actors like staggered behind him, except for the Expendables. That was a mess on who deserved top building because it was everybody. But yeah, it's all about the brand, right? The producers, the studio, when they're making a movie, when they're making Mission Impossible, they know that Tom Cruise has to be in Mission Impossible. Like he is that brand. And
I mean, he is Mission Impossible at this point.
Yeah, like he absolutely is. No, I mean, like if Tom Cruise stopped doing Mission Impossible, it would be a direct-to-DVD sequel, like a Netflix special.
It was just like he's the one who gets to blow up at people on set, and everybody's just like, "Wow, so brave." He's the best. Like, I agree they should follow COVID regulations, but like, man.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Did he?
Like, wow, what a diva.
Didn't he get a bunch of like basically robots made that were designed to detect people breaking, like not wearing masks or not distancing enough? Like it would detect if they were too close, and the robots would call them out on it.
I don't know. I saw that like blowing up on Reddit that he was like yelling at people on stage, and then I don't care about Hollywood actor on set drama. Like
No,
I don't care.
yeah.
But no, definitely interesting, and it's a lot better than however many years ago when like Christian Bale screamed at someone on set and like threw a phone at them.
Yeah.
At least they're trying to prevent a spreadable disease.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just think the entire premise of buying robots to yell at people in your voice when they're breaking rules because you can't be everywhere at once is just I mean, it's Tom Cruise. Like
Honestly, like, was he not paying attention during Minority Report? I don't know.
Well, I'm saying, like, if you had led off with the story but left his name out of it and then said guess the actor, like, I don't think it would be that crazy that in the top 5 names we named, his would come up. Like,
No. Yeah. I think diva and the stuff that we let celebrities get away with is a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty really, like, it's the whole idea that these people are artists and that they have some kind of, like, internal gift that makes their contributions, like, worth a little more. Like, Tom Cruise is just a really good actor, and Top Gun's good because he's in it. Mission Impossible is good because he's in it.
And yeah, and that really just does tie back to what we're talking about, where one person or at most a couple of people get all of the credit for something that winds up doing really well, when in a lot of cases it was right place, right time, you know, and they happened to do well in the role.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the whole story of, like, honestly, I think any actor, unless you're like related to someone that's in the industry and then gets you a position, but like a lot of it's, you know, you were on some stage production that they liked, or you wound up in like doing a couple indie films that got some traction at some festivals, and some studio producer saw you and was like, "Hey, I kind of like that kid." And like the track, like, not to necessarily say that multi-million-dollar film actors have a tragic life, but the double-edged sword to like films being, you know, like the actors being responsible for the success of the film is that like you ever like notice, like you ever ask yourself the question of like why have you never seen a Brendan Fraser movie or like a Bruce Willis film, or like, you know, like the actors that like did pretty well and just kind of disappeared. You just kind of never heard from them again.
What was that?
A Mike Myers film, you know, Austin Powers, Shrek, and then nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And a lot of it is just like for Mike Myers, like he did Austin Powers, he took a ton of money, he did Shrek, he made a ton of money, and then he did stuff like Love Guru and, you know, other less popular.
I'm sorry, what
like,
movie?
Yeah, right? No, and that's the thing is like, and all it is like you do 2 or 3 movies in a row that do okay or kind of flop, and then the industry is like, well, Mike Myers he's bad and dead to us at this point. So
yeah. I think it's an unfortunate nature of the beast, though, too, because like movies cost way too much money to produce, way too much money.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, you know, a movie is $100-200 million investment. And like that's not a small amount of money.
That's why they love Dwayne Johnson, right? Because he'll be in like anything. He'll be in a movie literally called Skyscraper about a building falling down.
Is it legal to call him Dwayne Johnson? I thought his name was officially Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
I thought for a while he was trying not to be called The Rock anymore, but now he's just kind of up on that.
Yeah, no, like you have to put that nickname in there, otherwise it's just like every time you say that, it just sounds so weird in my mind when you just say Dwayne Johnson. I'm like, who's that? Who? Oh, right.
Yeah, I definitely Dwayne The Rock Johnson, but yeah, no, well, and that's like I think that's indicative of it too, like the brand, the idea of brand. Like he was a wrestler, a famous wrestler, who also a bunch of his family members were also wrestlers. Is how he got into it.
Yeah,
and he did really well and got popular, and then started doing movies. Like Scorpion King was his big breakout role, and he was billed in that movie as The Rock.
Right.
And then as he would do more movies, it became Dwayne The Rock Johnson. And then as his brand changed from wrestler to actor, it became Dwayne Johnson.
The old John Cougar to John Mellencamp.
Shamelessly, The Scorpion King was one of my favorite movies growing up.
The Scorpion King was great. The whole Mummy 1 and 2 are great. The Scorpion 1 is great. Don't watch 2 through 5. They're pretty terrible.
There's 5 of them?
I think I'm pretty sure there's at least 4 of them.
I think I saw like the second one or part of the second one, and I just never went back.
Well, he only did the first one.
Oh, yeah.
The rest of them were, straight to DVD. There are...
Yeah, I saw the second one. Because I remember you wasn't in it.
The Mummy Returns, which is technically in the Scorpion King film series, but there are 5 Scorpion King movies.
That's crazy.
I was really hoping for like Land Before Time numbers. I was hoping.
I was like, where's 13?
20 something. Somehow
these dinosaurs never grow up. I don't know. It's inexplicable. Anyway, we did want to talk a little bit more about auteur theory outside of film. So, Zach, if you can go ahead and lead us in a little bit there.
Well, I mean, like, auteur, literally French for author, which, like, authorship itself is kind of complicated, right? Like, I would say auteur theory is much older than film. Like, the whole idea that one person has to be responsible, because we apply that to things like the Iliad, the Odyssey, which we claim were written by a dude named Homer, who historians generally agree doesn't exist, never existed. And it's just the
I'd never heard that.
A comprehensive oral tradition. And so, yeah, just like the entire idea of authorship is kind of iffy. The Renaissance artists we largely credit for, a bunch of the neoclassical artwork. We're basically overseers of what we today might call like an art workshop or an art factory even, where like apprentices and journeymen would all work collaboratively on like some of these like single massive pieces. And basically the famous Renaissance artist that we know was the guy with Final Cut.
I think it's like, I mean, even with that in mind, thinking about like, what if like I wind up being a famous painter and like I don't have a workshop of artists. Like I get my paints and I paint my paintings and I'm super famous. And so like you could argue that I'm the one that crafted this solely and I am therefore solely responsible for it. But like I didn't make the brushes, I didn't make the paint or the pigments, I didn't stretch the canvas, I didn't weave the cloth, like
right. Yeah. And so there were like notable Renaissance examples. Like Michaelangelo did everything by himself. He was like, I don't think for painting, but for sculpture, he did craft some of his own tools because he was like very demanding about how they had to be. He did paint the entire ceiling of the Sistine Chapel by himself, set up the scaffolding by himself.
That's still pretty wild.
Which is, yeah.
There's no foundation at all to the way people talk about neoclassical artists, Michaelangelo in particular, but even still, yeah, I think he would be the first to tell you that he was influenced by other artists, that he was influenced by, obviously, religious imagery. So yeah, like I don't think even Michelangelo would claim that he was, solely responsible for creating.
Yeah. I think the influence thing is kind of funny too, because like different art forms like acknowledge the influence more or less. Like film is pretty good about like, oh yeah, I really like whatever film. So like Tarantino clearly wears his influence or plagiarism on his sleeve. Music is really good, but like other art forms, like I don't know much about literary, but like I don't hear much, famous authors being like, oh yeah, I really like the prose style of this famous guy, and like really influenced it and combined it with the poetry of, and yeah, so like even influence, right? Like how can you say that this one person created this art if you also don't acknowledge the people that he learned from or they learned from?
I mean, effectively, everything we do though is building on things that people have done before us. I mean, everything So if we're to say, like, I understand the desire to give credit to as many, arguably as many people as possible that are directly involved. But once you go that far, I mean, if you're crediting your influence, do you also have to credit your influences, and so on? Like.
Yeah. And it becomes, I think it becomes bothersome, like in a realistic, like you can, if you really want to dive into one person's body of work, then yeah, you can talk about their influences and like, all the way back. But like if just casual conversation talking about different art or artists, I think there's, one step is about as far as you really can reasonably go without bogging down the conversation.
Yeah.
Short of going all the way back to the first guy in whatever cave, blowing paint on his hand. And like,
you can't talk about Shakespeare every time you try to talk about any other novel in English. It would be silly.
Basically.
Right.
But and Zach, I know we've talked about this definitely before, but this idea and to get out of art, but like the idea of business and commerce, like is auteur, how far outside of just art can auteur theory can it go?
I mean, we've always acted like it's real, especially in business specifically. Even tracing back to like Standard Oil, it's Rockefeller's business. Everybody still credits John D. Rockefeller with everything accomplished at Standard Oil. And then you advance that to the modern day. Dell Computers is still named for Michael Dell, the founder and original CEO, who is largely given credit for the rise of that company. And of course, there's a million other examples: Tesla, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And I think that really does wrap back around again to branding. It's just, I cannot memorize the names of every single engineer that works at Tesla. And arguably, and not to like upset anyone too much, but you could replace Elon Musk with some other CEO and keep all of the engineers and everything the same, and it would still roughly be the same company. But I think it would, see a large hit to its performance because of the brand association that Elon Musk has with Tesla.
It would still be making roughly the same product.
Right.
But the company itself would immediately change because, there's especially because it's a publicly traded stock, the whole deal about investor confidence.
Right, which again just goes to show that society is crediting Elon with authorship of Tesla, right?
I mean, like even think back to like when we were on board, like we saw multiple captains and XOs and chief of the boats, like these like really higher ups who came and went, and like I think the overall kind of feel, maybe like some general vibes, some kind of general direction change, but like our individual divisions still operated at their same capacity and still did the same work despite who the new engineer was or who the new captain was, or even above that, the fleet admiral in Washington that presides over the entirety of the Navy. Like,
I think that was honestly my favorite part of getting a new division officer, which for anyone that wasn't in the military or in the Navy, the division officer was the low-ranking junior officer directly in charge of any given division. And they changed out pretty regularly because it was just something they all needed experience with. And basically, they were a figurehead. I mean, they didn't do anything other than sign some paperwork because they had to, but anyone who was in the division knew they were completely directed by the people underneath of them.
They rotated through the division as training to figure out what we did. So like, inevitably we got them up to speed where they're actually like being able to give good insight and input, and then they swapped to another division and then learned how electricians worked for a while. And so like,
these are like your 22, 23-year-old like Annapolis grads kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
02, fresh out of college. Like this is their like they went through the training pipeline, and this is their first C command, and they're in charge of people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
or just even just like crediting people. Like how many times did you see a big evolution that involved ridiculously hard work of 12, 13 people, whatever, or even in your case, your division was a lot smaller, required the hard work of 3 to 5 people, but at the end of the day exactly one person was credited for it at the end, right? And especially in it wasn't just public image, but it was like actually your career and your ability to advance could be affected by how many of these green check marks you had.
You get enough awards, people start knowing that you're pretty good, right? You got this brand going that you're hard working, you're the right guy to turn to, so then they give you the next job and then you take over that one, and then this ball starts rolling. And the dark side, on the other half of it is something goes sideways and the whole thing falls apart. Like it's the guy at the top's always gonna get in trouble too, but they're also root down to the anti-auteur theory and figure out what guy at the bottom screwed it all up.
Right.
Kurosawa hadn't liked that blood splatter. I bet we would know.
Yeah, exactly. Like if that didn't wind up being a successful thing, then
And that cut would have never made it into the final film, and that prop guy probably would have gotten fired.
Yeah, he would have found out.
Yeah. I think my favorite, not to do too many Navy stories, but my favorite was we had a fire aboard the submarine, and the guy that put it out by himself, a guy above him was given credit for it. And even though that guy tried to go and get it changed and be like, no, it was this dude, they were like, the paperwork's already done, and it would be more paperwork to change it at this point, and so they just left it the way it was.
It's basically a participation trophy anyway, right?
I mean, yes, if you're not, it's a participation trophy if you're not trying to make a career out of it, sure, but for people that are trying to, do 20 years and make it somewhere, unfortunately, those participation trophies often wind up mattering.
Yeah. And so much of that, there's definitely a lot of problems with military advancement, but good thing. Let me preface this with that this is a good thing, but people aren't dying by the droves of horrible wars. So the way you advance for the most part in the military is you're this much better than the guy next to you.
One more merit on your sheet. One more.
Yeah, and so you've been in for 15 years. That medal that you got when you had been in for 2 years could be the edge that puts you over.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, the military. That's that could be a discussion in of itself. With military hierarchy and promotion.
We do have Auteur Theory with the military. How many people talk about Eisenhower, Patton, Nimitz, these guys?
Oh yeah. Brilliant general who did all of this hard work, et cetera, et cetera.
Eisenhower personally punched.
7-10 push pieces around, a few hours every day.
Yeah. No, I always to bring it back to film. I always love those scenes in films where you see the tacticians pushing pieces around on the board, and it's they give that order to a guy who gives that order to a guy who gives that order to 10,000 people, and those 10,000 people basically improv their way through that order when it actually comes down to it, right?
No, it's not StarCraft. You can't.
Yeah.
Individual.
There's not a guy out there just controlling every individual person, but at the end of the day, they're given the credit for it. So.
imagine a sergeant just getting a call from the general, like, "Hey, I need y'all like 2 feet to the left."
Yeah.
Yeah, you see that one guy, Private Johnson? So he's a little out of formation, so if you can just kind of tuck it in.
Yeah,
We
your
require
parents
more
out there,
Vespine gas.
if y'all can shoot a little bit more to the right.
Yeah, but
Yeah, no,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I absolutely agree with you that we talk about Eisenhower and MacArthur and Patton and all these generals that limited experience in the Navy, but I mean even the commanding officer on board a submarine, like they're not the day-to-day operations, let alone the squadron commander, let alone the fleet commander, let alone all the way up to the absolute highest person in the military. But they get the credit because it worked. Like the director gets the credit for a successful film.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know what they do. I've certainly never had the job, but I imagine that their job is largely like most other jobs at the top of management, because it's like managing financial numbers. You're given a budget and you got to stay under the budget, but buy everything you need.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
no, it's a big broad strokes.
yeah. So not to get too far off into the woods, but to kind of like bring this a little bit to a head, what are your guys' feelings about auteur theory or auteurism? I don't know if that's even a word, but like, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it a necessary evil? Is there a way around it? Zach?
I feel like I've probably made my position clear at this point. I'll just say it, that I think, yeah, auteur theory is ultimately kind of fake, right? Like, it's just a way that we have of giving credit that doesn't match the reality of how things are made. That said, as long as, yeah, like branding is important to the creative process, we're gonna have it. It's not going anywhere.
So you would say, like, in business or film or things like that, it's basically a necessary evil. Like, it has to exist because the ultimate goal of these things are to be profitable, and marketing says it needs to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
But is it something that, like, society as a whole, because society kind of dictates that, right? Like, I mean, if they're getting all of this information about, like, oh, this actor scored better in these metrics, and especially nowadays where, like, data harvesting is so much more accurate. It's no longer call in a focus group, and ask 10 people their opinion. Now it's literally just scrape all this information off Facebook or Reddit or whatever and see what people are talking about the most, which actors' names are trending, etc. But is it something that, like, the individual should try and be more aware of the role that they play in it? Because ultimately it's the individuals who determine who's popular. I mean, yes, obviously success and the ability to actually do the job matters a lot as well, right? Being personable to an extent, right? Like, you could be the smartest mathematician in the world and amazing at your job, but if you can't get up in front of a room full of cameras and people and talk your way out of a paper bag, then it's not going to matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's a certain level of convenience as a consumer of media. Like, I had to look up the Star Wars sound designer, even though some of his work I clearly respect a lot. It's like, I just am not going to memorize the credits to every movie that I watch. It's much easier to remember, like, oh yeah, it was made by George Lucas.
I think that's my position on it, is that, like, I think auteur theory isn't correct. Like, it's a sum of the parts. Like, everyone involved has different directors can have more or less influence, much like cinematographers can have more or less influence. CEOs can have more or less influence, but, like, just as far as, like, for the normal human, like, just as far as comprehension goes, like, I can't, every movie I watch, I don't have the time and resources to break down what every individual component, like, how much did the best script add, how much did food services add, how much, like, or to learn all their names. And so I think it's a shorthand that comes out of, like, the just inhumanly calculable amount of data that comes with it. But I think the key is to, like, keep that in mind. And, like, I remember, like, I think being on board the submarine gave me a lot of perspective on, like, it's okay to be the bottom level guy, because, like, turns out someone has to do that for the top guy to also have a job. So like each job is equally valid. And I think it's a problem with a lot of like work culture in America that like, if you're not the CEO, what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, and also
Which
just like pay differences, I think just exacerbate that, where people tie the amount of money they make to how successful they are as an individual.
Oh, yeah, right. No, I mean, like, yeah, absolutely a problem. And as far as like the advertising, Auteur Theory is never going to go away, because if you have to mass market something, you're going to come up with shorthands on how to display its worth. And if you can slap a famous director's name on your movie, if you're Steve Jobs and you stand up in front of a conference and talk about a new product, it's going to sell better.
Yeah, and ultimately you can't rebrand every single time somebody switches positions in a company. Like, even again, if Elon Musk were to sell all of his position in Tesla and they were to get another CEO in there, they would still call it Tesla because the brand outlives the individuals inside of it. And you see this a lot in like I would say in game companies, or even maybe film studios if you follow particular studios, where like you'll see like a string of high quality production from something, and then you come to expect that high quality production, but then the next product comes out and maybe it's garbage. You're like, oh man, what happened to this company? They used to be so good. And it's like, in the time between when you first experience them to the time when you're saying they're awful, I'd be amazed if any of the same people are even still there.
Right.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
And you still see Auteur Theory coming into games these days, right? People talk about the Dark Souls series like it's belongs exclusively to Hidetaka Miyazaki. It's just like he directed 2 out of the 3 games. He didn't even direct one of them.
Yeah, right.
Well, who was what was that? The ship of some Greek guy.
Ship of Theseus?
Yeah, Theseus. The idea that like if you change out all of the parts of a whole over time, is it still the original entity?
Yeah.
And I would definitely say that the vast majority of corporations or whatever we have today definitely put that to the test.
Yeah, no, and so I think with all that in mind, I think it's important on the consumer, like any consumer media or like any consumer, to like recognize and keep in mind that like, you can be hyped for, or you can think that like Tesla's new product, like their new car is going to be great. But keep in mind that like Elon Musk isn't the sole reason that car is going to be great.
Yeah.
Like maybe he had the big, maybe he was like, I'm sure he was there for like the Cybertruck's design. He bottom line the paperwork on it and the final thing, but like he wasn't the one that drew it up, right? So like let's just keep that in mind. And I also think because of that, you should like as an individual kind of know your own worth. Like don't think that because you're not the manager or the top dog at some company or the guy in charge of a project, like your input is very valid and valuable, and you should negotiate and fight for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
As long as credit is being distributed, demand yours. I mean, I think like ultimately, if that means having to brand yourself, then that's business, baby. That's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in today's world of like social media dominating everything, everyone really is a brand. I mean, anything you say and do is going to be saved forever on the internet, in some way, shape, or form.
Right. You have people on the internet who are only a brand.
Yeah.
Their entire value is the brand.
Absolutely. It's kind of funny you were talking about the Cybertruck design, and we're almost out of time here, so I don't want to get too off the path. But it's funny because I'm sure Elon Musk did have the final say in it, but I also highly doubt that he looked at every single drawing prior to the ones that finally got his approval stamp on it. And I just wondered, like we talked about the film, how much film is left on the cutting room floor before whoever has final cut comes in and goes, yes, this. It's like, I wonder how many good ideas and just like phenomenal products get left behind in the dustbins,
Oh yeah. No, how much effort and worth and work is put in that's just lost to the final credit, like to the final cut that will just never get seen.
Well, I don't even just mean the final cut, but they're lost to the pre-final cuts, right? Like before it's set down in front of, because the person who has final cut 9 times out of 10 is probably too busy nowadays. It's probably too busy to look at every step up to that point, right? And so it's like, how many things, like if they had seen a different version of it, but it never made it to them because 3 other people axed it along the way.
What's the old? So like at the old GE labs, they would just do R&D on anything because there wasn't really like a drive to make money off of it. There was more of a thought of like, eventually we'll find something to make money off of. It was horribly disorganized. They would all research the same thing without telling each other sometimes. But anyhow, one of the things, it was like in the 30s, a guy came in and started working there, and they just hazed him like they would any other newbie, and we're like, yeah, figure out how to frost the inside of a glass light bulb, which was like, it was like going to get elbow grease at the store or buying headlight fluid or something. And so then like he vanished to some corner of the labs for like 6 months and came back with a light bulb that he frosted the inside of.
That's amazing.
That's great.
Yeah, how many things haven't there been like that with like directed research where it's like, we need the Cybertruck, and so yeah, good ideas that just like, oh, they couldn't go anywhere or we couldn't spend the R&D on it.
So the moral of the story is hazing is good. Oh wait, no, wrong message. Wrong message. No.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement. The moral of the story is that like no matter where you are on the ladder, like your work matters, and yeah, you should respect that and demand that people around you respect it.
And not just, I mean, more than just respect, right? Know your value in terms of pay and fight for that. Right? Like the number of times I've seen people go into an interview / job offering and come out disappointed with how much money they will be making in their job, but then find out that they didn't negotiate for like a higher pay because they didn't know they could or didn't know how to, or they were just too afraid that like if they said, no, I need to make X amount of money, that the people would just be like, all right, get out of my office. It's like if you get to the point of them offering you a job and you say, I need to make this much money, and they say, we can't do that, they're not just going to immediately kick you out, right? It's still a negotiation. But yeah, I'd say we've pretty much hit all the points and kind of talked this into the ground. So with that, thank you, Zach. But I think unless you have anything else to contribute, we probably have nothing left to say.
Yeah, I think I would agree. And of course, right, don't forget, guys, put some comments down if you agree or disagree, and let us know what your opinions on the subject is.
Yeah, if you have any more good examples of ways you've seen Auteur Theory, ideally if you've ever seen it in a helpful manner, but in ways that it could be detrimental as well, that we didn't cover in this video, drop a comment down below, and hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah.